So as a part of that, IMO then gave a declaration of 1st July that two countries have successfully completed full implementation of the code, and that is India and Singapore.
Mm. And that's how you stopped history from changing.
Well, a small contribution,
And so it's very interesting
best of the ability.
because in your vision as your in your career, one of the bigger elements was to be able to contribute also to nation building. And this was, I think, these 2 years were one of the most significant contribution that you made into India's nation building.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
That journey was actually unimaginable.
Yeah. Like the Pirates of the Caribbean
Caribbean and
pirates.
all that, they would attack. They had cannons on their vessels, and
Yeah.
they would come closer and
And
damage the merchant ship.
okay.
Come on board, loot everything, kill everybody, and then take away.
Yeah.
And that's how the pirates operated.
Happen.
Yes. So
Right.
that happening is also part of the learning journey for the soul.
Yeah.
Purpose of why the soul is here and what
Yeah.
it has to do in
Yeah.
its physical form.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I am very, very excited to bring to you my next guest. He is a maritime expert. He was the ex-chief operating officer of a multi-million-dollar shipping business in Singapore. He was also one of the key reasons behind preventing US trade sanctions in India. And trust me, that's an amazing story. Please welcome my father and confidant, Indranil Majumdar, to this Out of Office show. Now, I've had a lot of fun recording this podcast with him because it goes really deep into his decisions as an engineer and then how he goes on to having a very, very exciting career in the shipping industry, how he understands and deals with pirates, all the way to actually securing Indian ports. What we have in this podcast is history. Had he and his team not done what he did back then, India would be a very different place. I think every person who's somewhere linked to the Indian subcontinent has to owe him and his team for what they've done to India. So listen to the story. It's fantastic. It has a lot of spiritual element to it because he manifested most of this stuff in his life. And that's where it gets exciting. Oh, and please do subscribe to this channel. I'm going to bring new exciting people every week. And we're going to discuss everything about their lives, how they've achieved their adventures, and how that has impacted all of us in some way or the other. So I'll not keep you on anymore. Enjoy the show. Hi, Daddy. Welcome to this Out of Office show. I'm very excited that you're here and we're finally getting to shoot this episode.
Thanks.
So I feel like a lot of things had to happen for this episode to even be shot in the first place. So I'm very grateful that things have come together. Let me start from the very top, just asking you outright, are you a spiritual person or are you a religious person?
I consider myself as a spiritual person.
Okay. And what do you think and why? I mean, what do you think is the difference?
The reason being saying that I'm spiritual because uh, right from the young age, uh, you know, the people around me, my parents, more importantly, my mother, she has always talked about universe, about planets, about,
Mm.
of course, element of God is always there, but that's at the background.
Yeah.
And there has always been a discussion about uh, the soul, the world there, and the physical world here,
Yeah.
and the purpose of somebody taking birth
Yeah.
There are some tasks to be done,
Yeah.
certain spiritual knowledge to be gained
Yeah.
by way of experiencing life. And then, of course, end of it, the one will always depart and go back to where one came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a part of the spiritual.
And this is what makes us as people who are just having a human experience. So we're actually spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
Here for a finite time, then we do what we have to do, and then we leave. Okay, so
So in the process of this journey, since we live in a community, there is certain culture, and religious is a strong element in that culture where
yeah,
the religious thinking, the religious practices, the rituals, the festivals,
Yeah.
all these uh, are connected to spirituality, but it also has an innate uh, reason to that being to hold the community together in a certain process. The higher objective is always that the whole community is spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that aside, now that we know that you're a spiritual person, do you believe that thoughts translate and create our different realities that we experience?
To large extent, yes. Uh, but I've also seen, I mean, it's debatable. It's in the sense that, yes, there are, when we say thoughts, people might uh, think of it as wishes. So uh, people think that I'm thinking, and this is what I want to do. This is what I want to achieve.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's how all their actions are dictated, or rather, their mind, helps them to move them towards that direction, whatever they are thinking. To that extent, yes, the thoughts definitely help in moving towards whatever the wishes are. Uh, but again, I think in addition to that, there are certain elements in nature which also acts on one's person. Now that is something not entirely in your control.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though you may be wishing, and
Yeah,
you may
but
be
there are
working
things
very, very
that
hard.
there are things that happen around,
Around.
which is not. Yeah. So in fact, that's very true, because while you need to be clear in your thoughts, you must also allow for things to happen.
Yes. So
Right.
that happening is also part of the learning journey for the soul.
Yeah.
Purpose of why the soul is here and what it has to do in
Yeah.
its physical form.
Yeah. Okay. What was going on in your mind, or what was your thoughts when you were deciding between being an engineer, being a lawyer, or being a doctor? Back in the days, I feel like these were the three key professions for men. But you decided to become an engineer and go into maritime engineering. What was the thought around at that point in time?
Engineering was always a childhood aspiration. And one of the reasons I would say, because the entire family had produced engineers, the senior generations,
Yeah.
most of them are engineers.
Mm.
So that was a natural conversation that used to happen at home. And so that molds the thinking of a young boy who is listening to all this. It is also, I have seen that this is also true where a child is part of a family where the senior generations and the generation before them are all doctors.
Yeah. And then they naturally become doctors.
They tend to, because the conversation is like that. I remember back in school, we used to have childhood playtime conversations or in between classes, and people used to always talk about what has been going on in their families. And it always now that now I reflect back and see that that conversation was always related to the profession that family or members of the family were
into at that point in
into
time.
that point in time. So that definitely has a strong impact in a child's mind. It
Yeah.
molds.
Okay.
Second thing is there is also a natural tendency that somebody is born, or the natural talent somebody is born with. So it's a combination of all this. Now, if all this come together, then possibly it is much more easier for a person to move on in his life's journey. Again, if there is a conflict because the person is different and the family members are in a different track,
Yeah.
then it might be little more challenging for that young person to decide which way he wants to grow.
The year of 1982, at that point in time, I think a lot of the political influences were around building and developing India as a nation, and making it more prosperous. And I think so. As a result of that, I mean, the tech boom hadn't happened fully; it was just beginning to see in general. No. Yes.
Well, you used the word
tech boom.
tech boom.
I mean
The
specifically,
boom was always there. Yeah, IT boom.
Yes. The IT boom hadn't happened then, but there was a national movement towards still building the country up.
Yes, of course. Soon after independence, India being a young nation, the only way for India to move ahead was to become, self-sustainable, and the economy has to sustain itself, and India has to continue to. I mean, India has to go on to the journey of producing, and then grow the economy. So. Historically, India has always been a farming uh, uh, country where most of the people were engaged in farming.
Yeah.
But with time, people have started to think that they have to get into the uh, producing physical things and develop the nation's infrastructure and capability so as to stand along with other countries in the world who are in that part. So, developing India's capacity, engineers were required.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the medical profession also had to develop. So, hence, of course, does. So, post-independence, these are the two main uh, professions which
It was really needed
at that point in time.
Okay. So now your family influence plus whatever was happening in the environment and whatever India needed at that point in time, both inspired you to make the decision to become a maritime engineer.
Okay, so it inspired me to take up engineering. And in addition to that, I always had an aspiration that, those days we used to have magazines, television was not there. And, my father used to subscribe to some of the magazines from Europe.
Yeah.
And that exposed me to the kind of progress they have made in the physically as a country, as a society, how the technology in those countries have developed.
Yeah.
So that this is something I wanted to also, personally see and experience myself, which means that I wanted to go there
and see all these
this happening. Look at the how people have developed their lives in these countries. So traveling was definitely one of the aspirations.
Mm.
Uh, and well, so I started thinking, what are the options? What are the professions which could help me, uh, fulfill my aspirations. If it had been, for example, uh, an engineering followed by civil service, for instance,
Mm.
I would have possibly be, serving my country
Mm.
on spending more time over there.
Mm.
But that uh, aspiration of seeing the world uh, possibly was either one could be in the airline industry or one could be
In the shipping
in the
industry.
shipping industry.
Okay. Okay. So this is the third motivator. One was also to be able to see these technological advancements and be able to travel from around India that led you to taking up shipping.
Hmm. Okay. The other element, I think that's very important. It there is a need for people to understand the culture of other people elsewhere in the world,
Mm.
and so that could help India to, possibly adopt and
Yeah.
grow further.
Yeah.
So look at the good things that those people have
Yeah.
doing and they have achieved,
Yeah.
not only physically but as a matter of social practices.
Mm.
Uh, they One thing, I have always been noting that uh, even though they have been developing uh, in the technological aspects,
Mhm.
but they are also quite careful of how they handle the environment, how they handle the
Mm.
nature.
How sustainable they can be
And this is not, we are using the term sustainability
today.
today,
Yeah.
but I have seen this long back
Mm.
in the thoughts of people around the world in various societies.
Mm.
So that was something always, you know, inspired me to adopt those kind of thinking
Mm.
into our culture as well.
Nice. So you were also curious about the culture and the mindset of the people in different countries and how that resulted in their technological improvements back then.
Yes.
Now it's interesting because I know a little bit about your life. So it's very interesting to see that all that you have thought and imagined is something that you have over the period of time in your life and in your career actually achieved in different ways.
Yes, it did. Actually, when we graduated,
Yeah.
this being a national institute of
Yeah.
India,
Yeah.
with the president of India being the chancellor of the institute,
Yeah.
uh, the shipping companies in India and people who were looking for trained engineers from elsewhere around
Yeah.
the world would,
Yeah.
uh, would approach the college and look for talents for hire. Now, I had this, strong desire to be able to see the outside world the soonest,
Okay.
and it happened. There were companies who were uh, bigger companies in the sense that public sector companies,
Yeah.
like the shipping corporation,
Yeah.
but and there were other large private sector companies also, but a lot of them had vessels which were plying along the coast of India. India has a large coastline of 7,500 kilometers dotted with ports. And waterway transportation is the most economical way to move goods in bulk.
Yeah.
So I was thinking in those days when the companies had arrived into the campus that, I should be hired by a company which has ships which are only foreign going.
Yeah.
And in my first engagement, I should be somewhere in some foreign land.
Nice. Okay.
And so it just happened that it was over a period of several days, and the first company which came in on the day one for campus selection and hire, it happened that it was an Indian company, but they never operated in India. Their vessels were all up. And I was fortunate. I got the job.
Yeah.
And soon, the first engagement that I had to travel out immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Soon upon hire.
So it was exactly how you had envisioned.
Yeah, exactly how I thought.
Nice. And I think there was this one important point I felt like you probably missed out. And I only know it because I've heard it from him many more times before. Is that the fact that you wanted to work for an Indian company? You wanted to work for an Indian company, right? And not a foreign. Like you could have gone for a foreign company who were hiring Indian talents back then, and who had ships around the world. But I remember you saying that you wanted to work for an Indian company and still have ships going around the world, but not in India. Was this true?
Yes, it is true.
Yeah.
It's very, very true.
And so it all kind of aligns.
It kind of aligned. It possibly that the feeling, the nationalistic feeling, possibly goes back into the family where I come from. The recollection I have is about my grandfather, who was involved during the freedom fight for India's liberation from the British colonization. And so that kind of feeling got transferred to my father. He wanted to be in the Indian civil services, so that he could serve. And then since I am from the marine engineering backgrounds, so, and plus moreover, if you look at the engineering college, DMIT, which is my college, and you look at the IITs, the amount of infrastructure that the government has uh, given to these institutes, they have provided for, there has to be some meaning that when we pass out from this institute, there should be some way we could contribute back to what the institute and the country has given. So that led to the thought that, at least in the initial days, I should be with an Indian company. Well, that's what the country and the college has given.
Yeah. That's very true. Okay. So this is beautiful. So at the end of your engineering, you managed to secure the right company that fit all your desires or bills, right? The nationalist aspect of things, where you wanted to work for an Indian company, then you wanted to be able to travel around the world. And within 1 month of securing the job, your first posting was in which country?
Oh, the first flight took us from Calcutta to Bombay and all the way to UK.
Okay. So London.
Joining place, no, not London, the joining place. Of course, we landed in London and took a domestic flight to a place called Hull.
Okay. Right. And this was your very first foreign trip out of India.
This was my first plane journey in my life, and it was all the way to UK.
Nice. So all the way from here to UK, and I mean, this is a very beautiful story of manifestation and also desire coming to life.
Very much.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know this is just the beginning, because it just gets more exciting, your story. So let's jump a couple of years ahead. So you have served in the ship, and in the ship you rose the different ranks that are there. So tell us a little bit about this. It's just for the benefit of people who do not know. What are the ranks in a maritime organization in a ship? specifically? Not the organization may have a lot of ranks, but within the ship there are some defined ranks. So tell us about that, and then we talk more.
Um, Okay, so merchant ships, the onboard structure is that uh, there is a captain.
Yeah.
Uh, he is in command of that vessel, and there are primarily two departments. One is the nautical department, other is the engineering department.
Mhm.
So the nautical department is headed by the captain. Then under him there is a chief officer. Then below him is the second officer, and then third officer. That's the officer rank. And then there are ratings on the nautical side, who are the deckhands,
Yeah.
and they help in operating the ships, maintaining the ships on that, and do the cargo work or the passenger work for the ship, depending on the type of the ship. Then
Okay.
the other department is the engineering department, which is headed by the chief engineer.
Okay.
And he is assisted by a second engineer, a third engineer, and a fourth and a fifth engineer. And below the office, these are the officers' rank, and below that, there are ratings who assist in operating the engineering department of the ship. So primarily, the engineering department has under their charge the propulsion of the ship, safe propulsion of the ship at all times,
Yeah.
365 days a year, round the clock.
Yeah.
Then power generation,
Yeah.
then maintaining the habitable conditions for living on board.
Yeah.
Um, then ensuring that the ship is safe from any fire incident.
Mm.
So, well, this is a common responsibility on both the departments, on the nautical side and on the engineering side, and ensuring that life of the people who are on the ship are safe.
Okay.
So the equipment which would help in emergency to preserve life, the upkeep of those equipments, for example, the lifeboats, etc., are also part of the life-saving appliance maintenance program.
Okay.
And the third department, it's relatively small, is the catering department.
Okay.
Of course, the people are working round the clock, and the ship is sailing round the clock.
So the food also needs to be
So the
prepared.
food, so that's done by the catering department, and that has again, it's a similar kind of uh, uh, terms that are used. So there is a chief cook and a second cook.
Okay.
Depending on the size of the ship, size, I mean the number of people on the ship. So there could be a third cook,
Yeah.
and then there are one or two stewards.
Okay.
And if there are too many people on board, then there could be a laundryman, etc. Just to give a brief
Yeah.
about what ship's organization would be.
So
Typical merchant ship.
okay. So now, how much would be, let's say, what would be the number of people or the number or the crew size of a big size ship?
Um, there has been a progression from the time vessels have become powered, or even before that, when there was no powered ships. When I say powered ship, that means the ship did not have its own internal power to sail from
Sail.
point A to point B.
Yeah.
So there were the days of sailing ships
Yeah.
where there were sails which were uh,
Like actual sails.
would actually capture the wind power,
Mm.
and then with the help of that, the ship will.
Oh.
So the sailing ships had lot of people to make the ship sail. They have to rig up the sails, they have to orient the sails, they
Yeah.
have to maintain the sails, and the ship was entirely dependent on the wind at sea. If there was no wind, possibly the ship will not be able to sail, or possibly will stop till the wind comes back again.
Mm.
So there were a huge number of people in a typical ship. Possibly it might be For the sailing ship, it could be, uh, I'm just guessing because I'm not, it was much before.
Oh, but in the
Yeah, about
modern ship, the one that
so from there, when the technology developed and the steam power came in, so there were steam engines and boilers. So there also, so let's say, on a typical merchant vessels, which could have possibly 60, 70 people as part of the ship's crew during the sailing time, then it reduced to somewhere uh, around 50, for example, when the ships were powered by steam boilers and steam engines.
right,
A good example is the Titanic.
right.
Titanic was the steam ship.
Okay, so that's where you would have like people taking in coal and
Coal, they
putting
have to
it
stoke
there.
the coal into the boiler.
But it's like a steam engine, like a car, not a car, a
Rail car,
rail
railway.
engine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But then these were so many boilers,
yeah,
depending on the power of the steam engine or the power the ship required to propel itself. And that defined how many people were required to stoke the boilers, and that is round the clock. So there were coal bunkers, and then people would take the coal from the bunkers and stoke it into the
right.
boiler.
But now it is just
Now,
oil based.
so now the steam engines have gone, the boilers have gone. It is now diesel engines, and now the modern days it is gas engines.
Okay.
And with all this change in technology, uh, the electronics have now started playing a huge role in the operation of the ship, much more like the airplanes. And the number of people have actually reduced because a lot of tasks is done by onboard computers.
Right.
So if you look at the complement that was there during the sailing time, then to the steamships, now to the modern ships with gas engines and high level of automation, because large ships may have 12 to 15 people only, all put together.
12 to 15.
Yes. So it has become so much lean now. And the rest of the task is all done by the automatic controls.
So, I have a burning question to ask you. Have you ever encountered pirates in your shipping journey?
Piracy is actually robbery at high sea. That's piracy. Now, historically, the pirates had their own vessels which would attack merchant vessels at high sea. And they were outside the jurisdiction of any particular country. The country's jurisdiction is only 12 nautical miles
From the coast.
from the coast.
Okay.
Beyond that, it is high sea. And pirates would take advantage that there is no legal restriction. So in one side, it's innocent merchant ship sailing under an innocent passage, and then the pirates will have their own ship to attack and loot whatever.
How do they usually attack? I mean, you must have heard some stories.
No, so though I'm talking about the old sailing ships when they were actually pirates and
like the Pirates of the Caribbean pirates
and all that, they would attack. They had cannons on their vessels, and they would come closer and damage the merchant ship.
Okay.
Come on board, loot everything, kill everybody, and then take away. And that's how the pirates operated. But modern day pirates, it's nothing like that because one, the modern ships have become very, very large. Gone were the days where sailing ships, they were much smaller and made of wood. Today's ships are steel ships, and they are having a length of about 300, 350 meters, the big ones. Really huge, mega size ships. So
it's hard to
so small time pirates definitely will not have a ship of that size.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It cost 150 million to build such vessels. So anyway, so the modern day piracy is they use a mothership, and that ship kind of stays outside the radar of the forces of various countries, and they have small skiffs, which are small boats actually. So when an ship on an innocent passage is passing by, these boats are lowered from the mothership, and they will be having automatic guns, possibly you know, RPGs, etc.
Mm.
And they will use this speedboat skips to approach a big vessel, and then they will uh, throw hooks onto the rails of the big vessel, and then they will climb
Enter.
and,
Okay.
yeah,
Uh,
and load whatever they would load.
mm.
If there is resistance, possibly harm the people,
Right.
and then get off. Or
So they don't necessarily like take the ship and then make it their own. All that doesn't happen. They just take the things and then they go away.
though there are various ways depending on where the piracy is happening.
Mm.
So in let's say of Somalia today, okay, so it's not, since the ships are very large, you can't today hijack a ship and put it in a small estuary and cover it up with in a forest foliage, and nobody will
Yeah.
be able to detect it.
Yeah.
Today's ships are too large to be able to do that. So no point hijacking. And then what will they, you know, they do hijack, but it's actually, pirates cannot in today's day operate on their own, because the ships are no longer carrying any, gold or jewelry. They are
Yeah.
carrying
They carry oil and
carrying
cars,
finished good.
expensive cars.
So what will a pirate do with all these products? So
Right.
unless they have a established chain where they can resell these things,
Maybe they
no,
the oil robberies often.
no. So, but then it's not possible. Not that it cannot happen. There
Mm.
could be instantly, but then it's a market that will be too much visible
Mm.
to the different countries, and they will know that this is pirated oil or a pirated product. So they may not be able to sell it.
Okay.
So it's not easy. You can't be selling 150,000 tons of oil.
Mm.
It's a huge. You require large tank farms
Yeah.
to store that
Okay.
and then resell it somewhere else. So
Mm.
the infrastructure required for these kind of activities, and that too on the black market, is humongous. So those things have gone, but they usually do more of petty thefts. At least um, since the time I remember, and a little before that, ships used to have some cash with the captain.
Mm.
As a part, some salary disbursement used to be there. Some percentage of the salary was paid on board. Rest was remitted at the cruise bank account. So, which means there was a decent amount of cash a ship used to carry in the ship safe. That was a good attraction for the pirates.
Mm.
So they
The
would
money, the
get
cash.
money, the cash.
Yeah.
So they would take, and they were all in US dollars.
Mm.
Now, when these things started happening, uh, the shipping companies, and of course then technology came in on the IT side, and
Mm.
you could do wire transfer, etc. So there was this money that was kept. One was part of it was to pay off the salary of the people,
Mm.
percentage of that on the ship, so that when in port they can go and buy something for themselves, for their families, etc. And there was also some cash kept for any emergency repairs that are to be attended
Done on the ship.
done on the ship, because then
Yeah.
you have to pay the local people
Mm.
so that this ship can be repaired and she can continue on the next voyage. But those things have now gone, because today with internet banking,
Mm.
the headquarters of the shipping company can transfer money to the local repair shop
Yeah.
electronically. There is no need to actually keep any cash on the ship.
Yeah.
And with ATMs and with cards available, the crew themselves can go even in a foreign country and
To
have the
withdraw.
international can withdraw whatever they wish.
They want to. Yeah.
So the amount of cash that is carried on the ship safe has actually become zero.
Mm. So digitalization here has actually helped reduce some element of piracy.
So
Okay.
so pirates. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Hijacking, yes. That's kidnapping and asking for a ransom.
Yeah.
That is there in some places in the world.
Mm.
For example, in West Africa,
Mm.
or even Somalia pirates, they
Mm.
operate in that mode. They will kidnap the senior officers, and
Then ask
they
for
will stop
ransom.
the ship.
Yeah.
and they can't hide the ship. The ship position is known.
Mm.
And then today with satellite imagery, you can always find it out where it is. But then you will not be able to approach the vessel because they have. So that's how it is happening in today's world. Again, please remember, uh, it's for the benefit of the audience who are listening. These things are very, very difficult tasks to do, and a pirate normally in today's world are not operating alone.
It has to be a part of a
They
bigger
are
gang
part of
or
a
a big
bigger organization.
organization.
And also see that they are armed with some of the sophisticated weapons today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a source of
So
those.
much strong
Pirate
power
cannot
behind.
manufacture those
Mm.
weapon at their home, in their kitchen,
Yeah.
or their
Yeah.
backyard. So somebody is supplying these arms.
Okay. About um ships and how ships are. We spoke a little bit about pirates as well. Um, After you went up the ranks, right? Uh, and you became a chief engineer in a ship. You went for a couple of voyages also. Um, what happened after that? Because I know you joined the Indian Register of Shipping. So tell us very short, in a very brief way, what made you transit out of a ship where you were traveling the world into coming on shore and joining the Indian Register of Shipping.
Okay. While on board, essentially, uh, there are two key tasks on a ship. One is the operation, and second is the management of the operation. That means the senior officers, they manage the team, and they manage the operation so that everything is done efficiently for the benefit of commerce. Now, when I reached the maximum I could as a chief engineer, I've reached the highest rank in my vertical. Uh, After some time, I felt that uh, more or less I have learned whatever I had to learn. I had experienced what I had to experience as a chief engineer. And there should be something more which has to excite me beyond chief engineer's role. And that was knowing more about what goes into, uh, we can use the term behind the scenes because those are not apparently visible to people who are on the ship, as to how ship is built for safe operations around the world, battling the weather, carrying different kind of dangerous cargo, and the ship systems which are so robust that it continues to perform 365 days a year, year after year. So who are these people who are doing this?
The manufacturers of
The
the
manufacturers of this, the designers of this,
Mm.
and how do they do it? What do they think? What do they learn? What are their experiences? So these things, I couldn't really mm, do much on board a vessel as a chief engineer. So I had to move to be able to understand the ship as a whole.
Okay. And that brought you to Indian Register of Shipping.
Yes. So
Good.
I was so there were options.
Mm.
One, uh, the normal usual transition is that uh, an engineer would move into the corporate headquarters of the shipping companies and become a superintendent, where he will manage operation of the ship or a fleet of ships, or few ships and then a fleet of ships when you become senior. Uh, Again, for the purpose of efficient commercial activity or cruise activity on passengers. But uh, that was not really, because I had done part of it while I was chief engineer. That was not really I was looking at. I wanted to know what goes behind in building such capable ships which are built so robustly that it almost, could be operated safely for 20-25 years. So my thought was to get into an industry which actually does this. And so I opted for joining a classification society, because the classification societies are the regulators, and they are people in they are involved in the approvals of the designs of the ship. They are involved in survey of the ships to ensure that they remain good all through the life of the ship, and they ensure that the people are safe at sea. So that led to me to take that option of joining a classification society, because at that time I felt that that will help me to develop my understanding
Okay.
what happens
All this, the behind
behind the
part of things.
ships.
So it was purely curiosity, at large, that made you take this jump into into IRS.
Oh, that is an interesting story, because when I was um, approaching different classification societies in India, so there's, of course, those days the most prominent was Lloyd's Register of Shipping. It was a brand name anybody would recognize around the world. Then, of course,
And this was a UK branded company that was in India.
yes,
Okay.
Lloyd's Register is headquartered in UK, and they had their classification business in India, as in many other countries in the world, all over the world. So there was Lloyd's Register of Shipping, and it was considered quite prestigious to be joining Lloyd's Register in those days.
But you didn't join.
Okay, so it just happened in my hometown, where I was appearing for the interview. So the Lloyd's Register was one side of the building. As you come out of the lift, it's on the left side, and the Indian Register was on the right side. So I first went to Lloyd's, and I was very fortunate. There was one very senior marine engineer who was again from my college, and of course the interview went well, and he was happy to consider. And then I thought, let me go to the other side of the building and see what is happening with Indian Register.
Okay.
And of course, I didn't have much idea that Indian Register would be the same as Lloyd's Register. When I went to Indian Register, I met the in charge over there. He was the district in charge of a few operation in few states in India, in the eastern side. And so apart from the regular questions that I had to face during the interview, so that they could assess my capability and my suitability to become a ship surveyor, he also said that, look, this is an Indian company and that is a foreign company. So it kind of again
went back to
my thoughts that I have decided that I should first serve the country and before I think of anything else. So that's how I joined IRS.
Okay. Very interesting story, indeed. And you chose.
Of course, the pay packet was actually bigger in Lloyd's Register, and they had better perks. But this was.
What was the difference? You don't have to tell me in terms of dollars or rupees, just a percentage difference, if you can, or multiple difference.
Indian Register had formed sometime in the mid-70s. Lloyd's was formed in few centuries before. So I think it's very difficult to compare the two. And naturally, the classification business of Indian Register was still at its infancy. Lloyd's was a very established business. The salary was definitely almost 3 times what Indian Register was offering. The perks were so much better in the
Wow.
with Lloyd's register compared to Indian register.
Yeah.
But the very fact that it was Indian is something which it, I took very deeply inside me. That this is what I should be
Nice.
working for.
Nice. I mean, in today's day and age where people just move jobs to for that multiple or that high, this is a very unheard of scenario where even with two offers, one clearly being a couple of multiples of the other, you decided to choose the one where you had the opportunity to make a nationalistic difference. Now, I want to build up because I feel like this nationalistic desire or did manifest later as well in your career when you were working on one of the bigger projects of your career completely, I feel, which was the ISPS project. And you told me about this, so that's why I know. But for the benefit of the audience, if you can just tell a little bit about what ISPS is.
So it all started globally amongst all maritime nations in the world, which is over 140 countries. The trigger point was the 9/11 terrorism attack on the Twin Towers in the city of New York.
Okay.
And when this happened, this was completely unthought of
Yeah.
by any country that's, the terrorists could even think of doing something like that at the level of planning, preparations, and then execution that happened. And it didn't happen suddenly. This was so planned over years, and then they went on to execute, and they did the damage and harmed the society. The Twin Towers collapsed.
Yeah.
So many lives, innocent lives perished. The immediate reaction around the world was that if airplanes can be used, a commercial airplane can be used as a weapon, a commercial ship can also be used as a weapon. So that led to a new maritime security code, which is called the ISPS code. And this was developed by IMO, which is an UN agency.
IMO, the International
Maritime
Organization. Okay.
These are the specialized agencies, something like the likes of WHO or UNICEF. So IOM is one of the specialized agencies of United Nations.
Okay.
And people around the world, experts around the world, they rushed to have a framework of maritime security systems which will address the prevention of use of ships as a weapon of mass destruction. Just for benefit of people who are not aware, a ship is a large vessel, could be carrying cargo in the order of 100,000, 150,000 tons or more. Now imagine that instead of legitimate cargo, the whole capacity is actually filled with explosive.
And that could wipe out.
Here we're talking about terrorism attack, people carrying improvised devices in their backpack and leaving it somewhere and then remotely exploding it. Then it something in the radius of possibly few hundred meters gets affected. Compare that with the ship of. So this is how much possibly they would have used an explosive of about kilogram, let's say, just to give it a number, and which is
already impacting couple of 100 meters.
Yes. And now we are talking about in tons, and not in tons, but we are talking about 100,000 tons. Now this would destroy a complete city wherever. So it is not just Twin Towers. It could be a complete city which will be destroyed by such a scale of explosion.
And some of our world's most important cities are all around ports. Like take Mumbai, for example. It is around the port. And then you have New York, or they're all built around water bodies. So this risk is a very large risk, or not risk, this threat could be a very large threat uh, for all these financial capitals of the world. Okay, so ISPS was a code made by the UN alongside 140 countries to secure the ports of those countries. Why is this so important for India? So tell me about your story about what happened in your journey implementing ISPS.
So those days of 9/11, when this happened, uh, the hotbed of germinating terrorists was always uh, the countries in the Middle East, and to a good extent the South Asian countries as well. Now, the Western world believed that there is reason to believe that the countries and in this part of the world, the Southeast Asia, also were uh, indirectly were now producing terrorists who would be be let out into the world to harm. Now, uh, whether India actually was involved in it, possibly no, but that was what the rest of the world felt, because India was surrounded by similar such.
Mm.
And in general, and specifically, US sent a notification to the Indian administration, uh, the Indian government, that if uh, India and the neighboring countries of India primarily, if they fail to implement this maritime security code, they would, institute embargo, which means that Indian ports will not be able to export their products out of the country, and that would be an economical disaster for any country if the country exports are stopped.
Mm.
And they had given very limited timeline. The when the code was adopted at the United Nations, IMO,
How long did they take to make it?
recently,
Yeah.
They had given just 3 years
Mm.
for it to be implemented,
Mm.
and it was very short, in the sense that India had a large coastline, as I said, 7,500
Yeah.
kilometers.
I mean, let's go deeper a little bit into this. So the code is like a book, or
Code is like a book.
what is it? Yeah.
Yeah, code is like a book. To describe it, it is like a A5 paper,
Mm.
this size, pink in color,
Mm. How thick is it?
and it's about this thick.
Okay.
The principles, this book gave, this code gave the framework of activities that required to be done to detect, deter, and prevent any kind of terrorism attack using ships as a weapon of mass destruction.
So naturally, if India was and Southeast Asia
Not Southeast Asia, I'm talking about South Asia.
South Asia. Okay. So if India and South Asia were in India being a part of South Asia was not able to do it, then the US would place embargoes and sanctions of sorts on India.
Correct.
And I believe that was also the time when, so this was how many years since 9/11? When they came up with this ruling.
And they came up this ruling sometime in early 2002.
Okay. And just about a decade, like a couple of years ago, Manmohan Singh had also opened up Indian economy.
Yes.
Right.
But this was Manmohan Singh's opening of Indian economy before this.
Yeah, much before that, exactly. So
India was
already developing and
exporting goods to other countries. Indian economy has started on the upward journey.
Okay. Okay. So now tell me more about how so this came so what happened after you got the notification, the government got the notification that they needed to implement ISPS around for India. And then from there, how did it come to IRS? How did it come to you? Tell us more about this.
Well, there is no, I mean, structured reason as to why it came uh, to me, but I'll start little backward. The government of India took it very seriously, and it was definitely extreme serious matter because it was an issue of the country's economy. I mean, and the country's reputation, both
Yeah.
more of economy and then of course the reputation of the country, that India had to come clean out of this. I would say perception.
Yeah.
To the extent I would know.
Yeah.
That India wouldn't do anything like that.
Mm.
And but economy was the main thing. It had to save up this economy. If any kind of trade sanctions, trade embargo would applied to India, it would have been extremely difficult for India uh, to then sustain itself. So and since this was to ISPS code was primarily for the maritime industry, of course the directives from the PMO's office would have gone to the Ministry of Shipping, and the Ministry of Shipping wanted to appoint a body who would be tasked to do this for the country. Now, importantly, one has to understand that this was a completely different kind of code. It had to do with uh, the system framework, then capability to understand how terrorism could possibly implement such tactics in the maritime and use ships as a part of achieving their destructive goals. And nobody in the entire maritime industry was even prepared for this because nobody ever worked in this kind of situations and didn't have any kind of experience or knowledge to do this. So there were shipbuilders, there were ship operators, shipping companies, and the ministries and administration who were primarily involved with commercial aspect of shipping. And then, of course, the ports. They had security systems primarily to prevent pilferage of goods that are being shipped in and out of the port, and second is to ensure that the goods are accounted for and the customs duties are paid. But preventing terrorism was never a thought that ever occurred to anybody in the maritime community and the port authorities.
It was out of the job scope.
It was completely out of what people had experienced, people had the knowledge of. So, as much as I see, it was issue of knowledge and experience, which was possibly zero at that point in time with the maritime communities. So, knowledge had to be, taken from people who were experts in that field. We have to know from them, we have to learn from them, and we have to take their help in implementing them. So there were administrative hurdles to be able to do that. And remember that India already had multiple agencies who are responsible for the country's security. On the water side, we have Indian Navy guarding the high seas of India, coastal waters. Then we have the Coast Guard guarding the territorial waters of Indian coastline. And then onshore, there is the police force. Then we have the armies safeguarding the borders of the country. These are
So
all
there were a lot of different bodies,
terrestrial.
but somehow they chose IRS.
No,
No.
the point is that these people were very specialized in their task.
Hmm.
And commercial activities, which the Ministry of Shipping is charged with, doesn't really fell under any other ministry. They were other defense ministry, for instance, or the home ministry were charged in uh, uh, detection and possibly fighting back. Here it was a little different, and it was to do with commercial shipping.
Hmm.
And so in the Ministry of Shipping, this was completely new,
Hmm.
completely new. And a direct involvement of the other ministries was not possible because the other ministries uh, expectedly wouldn't have the experience of the commercial shipping.
Okay.
So how to connect and then get this thing done? So that was a very complex issue for the country, and I think uh, to the extent I know about it uh, from the ministry, it came to Director General of Shipping, and Director General of Shipping, uh, in their reasonable understanding, they believe that there needs to be somebody, another body, which would be able to manage all this kind of different ministries and bring them together and work on this ISPS code.
Hmm.
Uh, and so they gave the job to Indian Register of Shipping.
Okay. Hmm.
And in Indian Register of Shipping, again, when the word came in, it was a chaos. I mean, nobody knew what to do because we were trained in engineering, we were trained in shipbuilding and shipping rules and shipping operation, but nobody would be dealing with
Hmm.
you know terrorism or uh, 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 uh,
So nobody would be.
simple thing, explosive. We had no idea of anything about explosives or weapons,
Okay.
kinds of mass destruction.
Yeah.
It was even more complex in trying to make every other government agency to understand their respective roles and the respective role what the maritime industry had in India. So that kind of clarity and uh, uh, you know delineation was required to specify the roles what the Navy would have, what Coast Guard would have, what police would have, uh, what the port authorities would have, what the shipping companies would have to do. So that was very challenging.
Hmm.
That's on the planning stage.
Hmm. Now
Uh,
let's go a little bit, break this down further. So now Iris got the task to do it,
the mandate.
the mandate to do it. So how many people did they put together in a team to execute ISPS in India?
So initially it was only two.
And then it remained
They,
two, or it expanded to?
it expanded subsequently because people had to be trained,
Right.
and then geographically the coastline is huge.
Yeah. So give us a sense of how huge India's coastline was at that point in time. How many ports, how many ships did you need to do this?
So India has a structure called major ports, minor ports, and private ports.
Hmm.
The major ports are under the central government of India,
Hmm.
and there were 12 major ports.
Hmm.
And then the ports that were under the states were called the minor ports.
Hmm.
And then under the states also came the private ports.
Sure. Okay. And how many were there?
So those were minor ports are about 42, and then a good number of private ports as well at that point in time.
Okay.
12, 42, and plus minor private ports that were developing in India those days.
Okay. So definitely more than 54 ports.
Yes, I mean small, big, every port had to be fortified.
Yeah. Okay.
And also remember that while these ports are on the coast, and because of intermodal transport system, which is the containers were actually uh, uh, held in facilities that were in the hinterland. So there were inland container freight stations, which were operated by the ports as well. So not only the physical port,
but also the
by the hinterland port as well.
Okay. So team of two people to implement this code in 54 over ports, and how many ships? Or was that
There were the merchant ships which came under the IMO conventions were about 800.
800. Wow.
I can't recall the exact number now, but it was in that order.
Okay.
Which needed to be again fortified and certified. So port facilities needed to be certified. When we say certified, that means a system had to be developed to ensure that there cannot be any way terrorists can enter ports. They can overpower and take over ships. They can buy ships and use that for the purpose of mass destruction. There cannot be any way, no means of mass destruction can be shipped through the port, which means they can't be stuffed into a container and the container goes through the port and gets loaded onto a ship, and then it can be taken somewhere else and exploded out. So all this have to be prevented, which means there have to be systems and processes which will be able to detect this well ahead in time.
Wow. Yeah. And here,
which means not only procedural things, but there has to be physical equipments also to do the detection part of it.
Right. That's right.
So ports had movement of goods using various different modes of transport. There were railway system, then there is a trucking system, and in some places there were inland waterway system.
And all of these needed
this to have be entry to the port had to be having systems which would detect as the traffic is passing through the gates.
Okay.
So within the physical equipments were required. And then the port was, as per the code, the port had to take the responsibility of managing and securing the waterfront of the port, where the port jurisdiction is. Beyond that jurisdiction, it is the Coast Guard, and beyond that, it is the Navy.
So this was all within the port area.
Facility limits.
Okay.
So that waterfront also needed to be secured, which means there had to be systems to secure that procedurally, and there have to be people and security boards to patrol that day and night.
Okay. So now you were given this humongous task, clearly, two people who'd have no understanding of weapons of mass destruction and all of that. You didn't have Google at that point in time. How did you go about learning what was in that ISPS code? Because it was just both of you to do this, and you had only roughly about 2 years to do it.
Yes, kind of. Yeah.
Right? Roughly about 2 years to do it. And if you hadn't done it, then there would be a big repercussion that would have changed the history of India as we know it today. So, how did you educate yourself? Tell us that. Without Google, it was just a book.
Well, emails had come in those days.
Okay.
It was 1993 when we had the commercial emails that started. So emails were available that point in time. And internet, World Wide Web started off. Those Google was there at very interesting along with Google. I think there was.
I think it was Yahoo still, or
Google was there. as a search engine. Then was Alta Vista was there as a search engine.
Okay.
And then Amazon was also there as a search engine.
Okay.
So there were three search engines that I recall, but they were all at their initial stage of
Yeah.
development. So I think the other two names I mentioned you may not have heard of as a search engine. So
NetSuite or
no. For example, Alta Vista. I
Okay.
don't think you
Yeah.
heard of.
Yeah.
That was a search engine which started the same time as Google.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was there, but not to the capability of today's time. But it was not really the search engine or, but email was the quickest way of communicating with people around the world.
Okay.
And it so happened that the ministry was also worried, and so they held a workshop uh, in India in Mumbai on maritime terrorism with experts from IMO. So it was, I remember it was a 2-day workshop, possibly. And it was more, so the experts from IMO, and specifically, uh, there was a gentleman who is considered as someone who has uh, uh, done, done, enormous work on the maritime security. He had develops uh, processes, maritime security to secure the cruise industry. So those days, yes, no, there were incidents where the USS Cole, the US warship, was targeted in Yemen by a small boat which has landed on expedition. They blew up the side of the USS Cole, and there were various other maritime incidents using another which terrorists have uh, done damage to.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so this gentleman had worked a lot in the maritime security uh, turf. He is Brigadier Brian Parrott, MBE, UK, member of the British Empire, and he's a decorated officer, and he is from the Special Air Service.
Okay.
Not to mention much about that.
So he came and he
He
basically
came
taught
to
you.
Mumbai, and he gave us the awareness part of it. 2 days was insufficient. So me and my senior, the two of us, we were asked to be in that workshop when there were other people from the other industry. But it was more of an awareness build up. So we had a first look at the code, what it looked like, and then there were narrations flipping through the pages. And to be very, very honest, I couldn't register anything because my mind was not tuned to that.
Yeah.
And then the team went away. He went away. Brigadier Brian Parrott went back. And then I went, and so two of us, my senior and me, and then when primarily, I would say I was losing sleep because on the ground I was tasked to do this, and I had no clue.
And time was just running out.
Time was running out.
Yeah.
So I found out, how to communicate, get in touch with Brigadier Brian Parrott in UK. So there was the maritime conference on maritime security was happening in London. And I had to go there, be part of the team which was tasked to develop systems and procedures to implement as part of the ISPS code in the countries. And this was covered by the London dailies or newspapers when this was happening. And so at the end of it, I had actually planned that, again, I went to London completely blank, have no idea what it's all about and how to do it. Yes, there was some idea what it is, but how to do it was possibly completely nil. No clue where to start and how to take it forward. And it was a huge project. So I had written request to Brigadier Brian Parrott.
The same
My visit that if I could
Mm.
personally come and see him and spend time with him. And I'm truly grateful. He said soon after the conference, I took a train to his place, and he took all the responsibility of hosting me, taking care of me, and teaching me. Because he was one of the architects who have actually drafted that code. Of course, it went through various approval process, etc., and adoption. So he knew every chapter of it, what it meant, what words, what was the intent behind that, and he could give me that in-depth perspective of each clause and what it meant and how to do it.
Yeah.
So we spent time in his office with his team. So he had a team who were again, decorated officers from the British Army, and they all sat down with drawings, whiteboards, sketches, models, and for next few days it was enormous learning exercise for me, learning from the experts who had done it themselves in their career.
Yeah.
So that is what I learned about the code, and mind you, the code was the first code of this kind in the maritime industry. Everything else was related to commerce and safety, nothing to do. There was no code for
Terrorism,
anti-terrorism, and there was no training institutes. There was no syllabus to train people those days. So how do I learn about it? I had to learn from some guru, and he was my guru.
So so this seems like, sort of a divine intervention that kind of came in through him, of course. But what did you write to him that made him not just agree to teach you personally, but also take care of your accommodation, food, everything?
I think there are multiple factors. Brigadier Parrott was involved in IMO in and then in his advisory capacity to see that the code is robust and to assess possibly that the code has been implemented around the world. So he was tasked. He was in that advisory capacity at IMO, and he had come to India, and he possibly have seen what we are trying to do. He possibly would have sensed the urgency and also must have sensed that the capability that we had. So when I wrote that, I have been tasked to do this and I have no knowledge, no understanding, it was for me crying out for help. So I think put together, one, he had his own responsibility that he has to, advise IMO on global implementation status. And when I wrote to him, he felt that he has to do it as a part of his responsibility.
Yeah. Wonderful. So it was just completely out of responsibility and because you reached out to him. Had you never reached out and you had suffered in silence, which a lot of people in corporate do, and they suffer in silence. So you had reached out, and that's transcribed into a beautiful learning session.
It was. And in fact, not only that, he taught me, he also fed me and took care of me while I stayed with him.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it, I was earning in rupees and I had to, spend in pounds, which is absolutely unimaginable for me. But I didn't even think of it because he just took care of everything.
Yeah.
I didn't have to spend anything from my pocket. Neither didn't have the resources and capability.
I feel like a lot of people, and I'm telling you here because a lot of people would have just not even reached out thinking about all these financial constraints in the first place.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah. But in spirituality, there is definitely this big concept that once you have it in your mind's eye, you let it let things transcribe.
Yes.
Let the universe show you the way, and all you do is say a yes, yes, and participate in things that are aligned to yourself.
Very much true, actually.
Yeah,
Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened.
yeah, yeah.
So that is where I learned everything about the code. And then when I came back, I had a much clearer mind as to how to uh, do the planning, how to design. Then I spoke about delineation of task of different agencies in India. What needed, what would be the plan? So one activities during that design and implement it was to physically visit every facility, every port, understand the weaknesses of that port in the processes, in their physical structure, and the kind of waterfront and the kind of vessels that were.
So you visited over 54 ports.
So that is the time when we had to bring in more members within so the same. So initial training, of course, had to be, so I had to develop the coursework uh, for the port facility part of it. And so this is all came because of my learning from Radio Parrot.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the management in ISP also reached out to experts in the Indian Army, and one of the things which I would say was a great uh, thinking was at the ministerial level was to engage, to assist us in doing the risk analysis of the various regions in India to get Intelligence Bureau of India to work with us together.
Wow.
So primarily in the entire next 2 years, it was
Different parties.
different parties had their role, but my constant teammate, I would say, I mean, from the different government departments, of course, we work together as a team. But the constant team member would be the people from IB at all times. So while the structure was being designed and developed, I would do that. I would take off help of uh, an ex-army officer who was experts in explosives to be able to draw out the various capabilities of the weapons that were there, and then the level of destruction it could do. And then with help, the IB officials were amazing. They would give so much insight to the risks at every part of India. Each part of India was completely different from the other. There was no one solution that I could develop. Each port had to be treated in its own merit, depending on the surrounding of that port, and what was happening in that state, and the kind of uh, dark activities that was very specific to that region.
Yeah.
So all that came from IB. And so all these people fed me, and I could then develop the plan for all the port facilities, the major ones and some of the minor ones. And then, of course, by then time, the training part was also going on. And me and my senior colleague had developed the training material, and then we could train some of my other colleagues who then went down and did the other ports. So that was on the planning side. What was other part that was very important is assessment part, physical assessment. That means we visit every port and physically assess the weaknesses of that port, fortifying them. So, and that had to be done both day and night time, because at night the vulnerabilities are more exposed to. It's because illumination, barricades, fences, underground passages. One wouldn't be knowing much during the daytime, and then the processes generally tend to slacken up during the night shifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that exposes even more vulnerabilities. I had
Yeah.
known ports where access from the city to the ports were through underground uh, tunnels.
Oh.
Those tunnels were actually drainage channels. They are supposed to drain off stormwater in the city into the sea, not into the port, but into the sea. But because the port was there, the channels were actually running underground. That was the concept of design those days when Indian ports were developed, or any port was developed.
Yeah.
Because normally a city grows around the port. The port starts international trading, and by the city grows on size. So the city builders would be directing the storm waters through the ports into the sea. That was the normal initial stages. So those are still there.
Yeah, just like in Singapore, all these canals.
Canals, yeah, but these were all underground. So
yeah,
so people, there were groups who were into nefarious activities, and they would use those tunnels to come into the port. And so I had to discover those and take actions, preventive actions,
right,
in the sense that we had to block them off.
right.
So so day and night we had to do that. We had requested Brian Parrott's team to send us some of the trained advisor. Not only was we were helped by IB and the army officers and other naval officers, but we were also helped by Brigadier Brian Parrott's learned team members who had come down, and we have spent night after night in the major ports, going through every inch of the port, jungles, peripheries, fences, waterfront, and stop and look, find where the vulnerabilities are, and then develop a plan how to address those issues, and then develop processes. So yeah, it was that, and took 2 years. And I remember I could hardly see you.
Yeah.
I could hardly see mom those days. It was moving from one port to the other. And not that it was physical, it was also, I recall, without naming the port, it was quite dangerous activity as well, because some of the people who were already involved in nefarious activities and used the ports as a conduit, they knew that I and the teams were doing something to stop that.
Right.
Because, I was definitely...
And that was a threat to life.
It was a threat to life. Because they could see we were walking around and plugging up all those open access points, which was not in the best of their interest. And they were quite nefarious, because in some port, they're extremely powerful, and they had even attacked senior police officers historically, because they had...
How did you protect yourself?
Not much, in the sense that, of course, there was no guards given, but we were always together as a team with the other officials, and I wouldn't never walk alone. So it was always a team which would be going, but we were driving
just like common sense.
Common sense. Don't let general public, or don't do anything that might excite them. Do it as much quietly as possible and continue to implement those systems.
Right. So then what happened at the end of all of these?
Okay, so every month we had to send status of how the progress is
to the US?
done to IMO.
To IMO, okay.
Because IMO was monitoring across
all the implementations, okay.
So every month I had developed systems where the conservator of the ports would then task his team to send update status, and then there was a methodology which I had developed. There were many factors in accordance with that ISPS code, which needed to be looked into, and the status had to be, you know, uh, monitored against all those issues. So I had created a tabular format and with bar charts and percentages, how much achieves and what was achieved and how much more time is needed. So
Like a Gantt chart.
it was like a project Gantt chart, and
Yeah.
every port would send into us their status
Yeah.
with evidences that this is when the structure has been put up.
Did you use Excel and Word at that point in time
Yes,
to do all this? Okay.
Yes, of course. And we would then compile all the reports of every port together and send it in a summary format to the ministry. Ministry would transmit it to the IMO, and they would get at a glance would know. And there were evidences to
Back it up.
back it up.
Yeah.
Photographs of structures coming up, gangs coming up, cameras being fitted, various equipment being installed, and processes being implemented, forms, formats, passes, port entry passes, ID verifications, issuance of new passes to new contractors of the port, people who were granted access, people who would be denied access, and auditing systems. Okay. And so all that used to be sent every month, and we could see how it is progressing month after month. And we would be having monthly meetings with the ports, the director general's offices as well, port representative of all the ports, the senior officers. Usually it is the deputy conservator who would come. And so yeah, that's, and end of it, it was quite evident, because once you see all that in a graphical form and with evidences, and anybody who sees that knows that it is moving, it is being done. And we submitted completion report to IMO sometime around May or early June of 2004. The deadline was 1st July 2004 when it had to be declared all completed.
1st July 2004.
United States Coast Guard had expressed their desire to come to India and check. So they did that as well. And it is so by 30th June we sent the last report up. And well, it was the need of the hour to do this. It was not that we were trying to have achievement as an objective. It was need to do it and complete it, and to prove the world that India has done.
So on 1st July 2004, what happened?
On 1st July 2004, we got advice from the ministry that IMO had given a declaration, because people around the world were very worried in all maritime countries that some ships will be stopped, some ports will be shut down. They were not certified. They could not complete doing this. So as a part of that, IMO then gave a declaration of 1st July that 2 countries have successfully completed full implementation of the code, and that is India and Singapore.
And that's how you stopped history from changing.
Well, a small contribution.
So it's very interesting.
Best of the ability.
Because in your vision, in your career, one of the bigger elements was to be able to contribute also to nation building. And this was, I think, these 2 years were one of the most significant contribution that you made into India's nation building.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
That journey was actually unimaginable.
Yeah. I mean, now...
And it's not a single man's effort. It's
all ministries had to come together. So many...
Ministry, every team member had come together. So that was the need of the hour to do that. No choice.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. I think this was one of the most amazing stories that needed to be brought into the world. I think this is probably, it's got enough content to even make a film. I think that's fantastic. Now, there is, of course, a lot more that I would like to go into, which is your stint in Bangkok and entrepreneurship there. But I will end this very soon. So we will need to definitely do a part two. So let's consider this part one, and then we will do a part two at a later point in time where we can talk about your journey into Bangkok and then Singapore and then everything that happened after that.
Sure. Happy to share.